As we are now less than a month away from the presidential election in 2020, we must cover Sleepy Joe's town hall, hosted by Lester Holt, not Don Lemon, different black guy. Anyways, let's get started right now, and subscribe, by the way.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lester. Appreciate it.
We got a lot to talk about, and I really want these folks to drive the conversation as much as we can. But I've got to ask you about some of the things that Hallie just mentioned there. President discharged from the hospital today, flown aboard Marine One back to the White House. At one point, he climbs the stairs and he takes his mask off with other people who appeared to be somewhat nearby. Did you see it? Did you hear about it? What's your reaction, sir?
I would hope that the president, having gone through what he went through, and I'm glad he seems to be coming along pretty well, would communicate the right lesson to the American people. Masks matter. These masks, they matter. It matters. It saves lives. It prevents the spread of the disease. Social distancing. Instead of talking about what the only thing I heard was one of the tweets saying that, don't be so concerned about all this, essentially. There's a lot to be concerned about. 210,000 people have died. You have, about 1,000 people a day getting the coronavirus, 50,000 a week. So it's a great concern. I hope no one walks away with the message thinking that it is not a problem. It's a serious problem. It's an international pandemic, and we have 4% of the population and 20% of the deaths.
I know you offered your good wishes to the president and the first lady. Did you pick up the phone? Did you call the president?
No, I didn't. I inquired whether I should do that, and the decision was that would probably be intrusive. But I'm truly happy that if he appears to be, if things are really moving along like he said, and particularly the first lady as well, I'm very happy for that.
You have built your campaign around the coronavirus has been your number one issue. So when you hear that this president was infected with COVID-19, were you surprised?
Quite frankly, I wasn't surprised. For the last 3 months, 3 times a week, I'm on the telephone and on Zoom with some of the leading immunologists in the nation, and they go through everything that's happening. And so the idea that COVID does not spread in proximity when you don't have a mask on, when you're not socially distancing, when there's large groups of people, when you're inside particularly, but even when you're outside, that's not surprising. And again, we keep forgetting, or we're not talking about it. 210,000 people have died already, and the expectation is if nothing changes, we're going to have another 200,000 dead by the end of the year. That's 400,000 dead, God forbid if that happens. That's more than were killed in 1 year in America than 4 years in World War II.
I want to ask you about the information we've been given on the president's medical condition from his doctors at Walter Reed, also some of the information about his condition from the White House. Do you think that the doctors have been forthcoming, that they've been transparent? Do you trust the assessments we've been hearing?
I'm not going to second guess his doctors. He has some of the best health care in the world, and I'm happy it was available to him. It should be available to the President of the United States of America. But the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of people here in this audience, your cameramen, if God forbid something happened to them, they don't have that access to that care. So it's comparing sort of apples and oranges a little bit.
You were on the debate stage with the president for 90 minutes. You were socially distant, but hearing that he was infected, did you have a moment of pause, of worry, of concern for your own safety?
No, because, look, I've been fastidious about the social distancing. I've been fastidious about wearing a mask when I'm not socially distanced. And even then, remaining socially distanced. And so we never got closer than you and I are right now, as well as when Melania came up on the stage, she smiled and waved. I waved to her, but it was the same distance. It was a little disconcerting to look out and see that his whole section, no one had masks on. While my wife was sitting further down, had a mask on, the people with us had masks on. I didn't quite get that.
You were able to see that from where you were?
Yes, when they came in, yes. Because I was standing backstage and you could see people coming in, and a lot of people didn't have masks on.
If you become president, can you pledge transparency about your health if, God forbid, something like this happened or some other health issue, that you would be forthcoming
yes,
with the American people?
I can understand there can be certain circumstances relating to national security where every detail would not be made available in the middle of a particular crisis. But the overall question of whether or not I'd be transparent about whether or not I had a serious problem or what treatment I got, yes, but sometimes for a president that would come after the fact. So I'm not being critical of the fact that every single detail was not released. There is the HIPAA rules that even apply to president, but they have consequences for a president beyond the rules relating to what is able
well,
to be done and not
he may be
done
more
without
coherent than he normally is. I'm surprised,
well.
but
So that is to
his
say
face
that you
is
would
so
be
old.
something
Like he's
you
turning
think would be
brown.
okay
Like
to
his
hold
skin
back.
is literally
Well,
falling apart.
Only on the margins and only for the moment. In other words, I can't imagine, you know, other presidents have been through it. I was there when Ronald Reagan was shot. He was transparent, but they didn't go into every single detail precisely. And that's one of my buddies going on by it. But all kidding aside, so I think on balance, you have to tell the whole truth, what had happened, what was happening, and what's going on. But as moment to moment, I'm not sure that is an absolute requirement. But we cannot mislead about certain things, and I'm not saying they have. If, in fact, the president had, in fact, contracted the virus and knew it before he went on in the public, encounters and was not wearing a mask, that's a different thing.
Yeah, one more question on this before we move on and hear from some of the voters. A recent poll said 65% of Americans think the president bears some responsibility for contracting this virus. Do you agree?
Look, anybody who contracts the virus by essentially saying masks don't matter, social distancing doesn't matter, I think is responsible for what happens to them. If these people took off their masks, and they all have them on, I notice, and just all of a sudden got in a gaggle and started talking to one another, well, they're taking responsibility that, in fact, they should be held responsible for. Because every major scientist and doctor and immunologist has said that's a very dangerous thing to do. The particles and droplets can stay in the air for a long time, longer than they thought. It can go beyond 10 feet. There's all kinds of things they've learned and know. And look, I view wearing this mask not so much protecting me, but as a patriotic responsibility. All the tough guys say, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not afraid. Well, be afraid for your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your neighbor, your coworker. That's who you're protecting having this mask on. And it should be viewed as a patriotic duty to protect those around you.
You ready to hear from some voters now?
Sure.
All right.
The last thing he should be saying is that he's patriotic,
Vanessa,
okay?
nice to see you.
God dang it.
Thank you for being with us. What's your question for the Vice President?
Hi, Vice President Biden. Sorry, I'm a little nervous here.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Thank you, sir. Vice President Biden, I work in Miami as a pediatric nurse. And since the beginning of this pandemic, the government has been dysfunctional and disorganized in their response.
Can't hear it.
Miami-Dade County leads the state of Florida in the number of COVID cases and deaths. And Florida just ranked number 2 in the COVID cases of children. Another larger wave is expected this fall, sir. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan is that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and also any other future pandemics that may arise?
Were you able to hear
Thank
okay?
you, sir.
I can hear part of it. I'm sorry. The television in front of you, and I didn't catch the phone.
Yeah, we got the traffic. I mean, the meat of her question is another larger wave expected this fall. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and any other future pandemics that will arise?
Well, first of all, as President of the United States, I would make a federal mandate on federal property, federal buildings. You must wear a mask, period, and you must be socially distanced, number 1. Number 2, I would make sure we move very rapidly to get testing available to everyone that's quickly available, so people can, in fact, be in a position where they can open their businesses, they can test their employees, test people coming in. I would make sure that we're in a situation, I don't know whether you have children. If you have children and they're not in school, well, you have to make a tough decision, many people. Excuse my back, I apologize. But do you in fact
Dude,
stay
his hair's
home
freaking
and
terrible.
be able to pay your rent
And
because
he
you have
has
to take
hair
care of your
plugs in, by the
child?
way.
What do you do? Those very difficult decisions. And so the way we know how to open schools safely, I laid out a plan all the way back in the beginning of the summer. We should provide them for the ventilation they need, by all the needs that they have for masks and social distancing and testing. For example, the president had committed, and FEMA had, the Emergency Management Organization, said we're going to give masks to teachers as well as to the students. And then the administration said, well, no, guess what? That's not a national emergency. Well, what in God's name is a national emergency if that's not a national emergency? So it costs money to deal with all of these things, and we should, in fact, be using the money passed by the Congress to see to it that people can open their businesses safely, be able to keep their employees on the payroll, making sure they can have the sanitation capacity and ability to sanitize their stores as well as their schools. All of those things we will do, and more. I know I'm going on too long, but there's a lot here that relates to what's totally within our wheelhouse.
Well, can I follow up with that a little bit?
Sure.
I heard
He
you
skips like a
mention this
word per
idea of a
sentence,
national
like he's
mandate.
struggling to
You
speak
mentioned
here.
it before for masks, but what power does a president have to make that happen?
Beyond the federal property, I would go out and I would call all the governors.
See this? How he's
to the
screwing
White
up his
House.
speech
Some
here?
probably wouldn't come. And I'd call the governors and I'd say to the mayors as well as the county executives, take responsibility. Take responsibility
He's
and
cucking
lay
on
out
the
the
mask thing.
guidelines. Look, folks, one of the problems is this president said, I take no responsibility. Literally, it's not my responsibility. Well, if it's not his responsibility, he talked about this being like a time of war. We are under attack. As I said earlier, 200,000 plus have died. 50,000 a day are getting the virus. 1,000 a day thereabouts are dying. This is a national emergency. And so the president should take responsibility, and the federal government has an obligation to.
Let's rewind the tape. I think
200,000 plus have died. 50,000 a day are getting the virus. 1,000 a day thereabouts are dying.
50,000 get the virus a day. Are you sure about that? And 1,000 die a day. Hold on. 1,000 sounds about right. That's on the upper end of the ballpark. It's probably more like 800 or 900, but okay, fine. In terms of the 50,000, that seems like a high number to me. And, you know, the cases, like, he's hyping them up as if they're even at a similar level as to the deaths, which is not even close. Like, you like, at worst, the death rate is like 2% or something. Cumulative. And again, the people that are dying are, like, older than he is. So, again, what, like, they were going to die the year after of a heart attack. Like, the amount, and COVID is slipping as an important issue for voters, so he's really losing his grasp on this problem in particular.
This is a national emergency. And so the president should take responsibility, and the federal government has an obligation to lay out basic guidelines, and the science matters. Listen to the scientists.
All right. Let's get another question. Vanessa, thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Jonathan Pines. He's an undecided voter from Hollywood, Florida, a registered Republican. I think he says he's leaning toward you. What's your question?
I can't see Jonathan, but I'll back up here. Maybe I can see you from there. The camera.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
You're a good-looking guy. That's why they want to get the camera shot.
Thank you. I agree. In light of recent events, it's obvious that the pandemic can reach anyone. While the health and lives of the American people should come first, there's been a combination of fear, shutdowns, isolationism, conflicting data, and school closings. And these have long-lasting effects which have taken both a psychological and financial toll on nearly all of us. How do you plan to balance these factors with the expectation that COVID will be with us for the foreseeable future?
Well, first of all, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Science matters. There's overwhelming scientific consensus. The president's own head of CDC, Dr. Redfield, held up a mask and said, if you put this mask on between now and January, you'll save 100. He said, it's more important than a virus, than a vaccine. You can save more lives. they've laid out. University of Washington, one of the great universities that lays out what all these projections. They said there could be 200,000 people dead between now and January. And they said if you wear a mask, we can save 100,000 lives. Now, what is this macho thing, I'm not going to wear a mask? What's the deal here? Big deal. Does it hurt you? Be patriotic, for God's sake. Take care of yourself, but take care of your neighbors. And so the one thing we have to do is we have to unite the country. One of the reasons when I said I was running, I had 3 objectives. One, to restore the soul of this country so we start acting with a decency that reflects who we are. Secondly, rebuild the middle class. And thirdly, unite the country. Remember, I was roundly criticized in my primaries. You can't unite the country. We must. It's the only way we can move forward. And the country is ready to be united.
He is desperate to elicit emotion here.
They're ready to be united.
Look at his eyes. He is straining so hard.
We talk. Politics has become so.
He's going to give himself a heart attack.
So ugly that we got to get rid of that. We got to just start talking to each other like we respect each other, which we have to.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Our next question comes
He
from
looks
Brian
so out of
Stevens,
shape in
recently
terms of the
unemployed flight
presidency.
attendant who started an online support group for laid-off airline workers.
That's great. Hello, I want to thank you, sir, for having me here and taking my question. I am one of over 8,000 flight attendants that American Airlines had to furlough this past weekend. And my question to you is, if you're elected president, what will you do to restore the travel and tourism industry, to get it back on its feet and get it back up to pre-COVID levels so that we're just not throwing more money at it?
Well, look, my best friend, I'm a lucky man. I married into a family with 5 daughters. That means that one of them always loves you, not the same one. Even when your wife's mad, there's always one with you. One of my sister-in-law is an attendant, and she's been for a long, long time, facing the same kind of thing you're facing. We could have, in fact, already solved that problem. The Congress passed the legislation to provide the money to keep the airlines up and running and to provide for the kinds of ways in which you can sanitize that aircraft, make sure everyone has on a mask. For example, recently, the Department of Transportation turned down a request from bus drivers and mass transit people and you guys of saying everybody to get in a plane has to have a mask on. If they don't have a mask on, then they can't get in the plane. What are we doing? Do you feel comfortable being being an attendant and people getting on a crowded plane or not a crowded plane with no mask? You don't. It's just to protect you, protect one another. It's within our power to do it. And look, one of the things we have to do is we have to provide funding for people who have been caught in the lurch. Look, the president, and he should, got great medical care. But that's why I'm arguing from the very beginning of this. Everyone who contracts COVID should have their bills paid for. People can't afford this. And we're in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Already 10 million people have lost their employer-based insurance, their COVID-based insurance, 10 million. And they're in court trying to do away with another 20 million who already get it through Obamacare. And in addition to that, 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. You know people who have had COVID. I hope it'd be wonderful if you didn't. But if you do, you know you end up with heart problems and lung scarring. They become pre-existing conditions. So there's a lot of things we can do. But guess what, folks? If we can spend money giving tax breaks for racehorses, we can give tax breaks for the kinds of things we're out there doing, 3 martini lunch. God almighty, why can't we, in fact, give a tax break for people a free access to health care if you're in the middle of a COVID crisis?
All right, thank you. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more questions.
He's just too out of it, guys. I'm sorry. He's just too old. He keeps missing, like, every 1 out of 10 sentences he completely flubs up. And then, aside from that, every 10th word he misses out on pronunciation, if not just completely forgetting about it. I mean, you gotta be kidding me how far the country has gone to have the Democratic nominee be this guy. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Next question comes from Ingrid Gillum Alexander, who is undecided but leaning toward Biden. What's your question?
Good evening, Mr. Biden.
I can hear you.
Watching the debate, I noticed that President Trump was bullying you, and I'm worried that it knocked you off your game. How do I know that you're able to forcefully lead this country moving forward when being faced with unforeseen challenges and other bullies?
Well, I'm used to bullies. I used to stutter when I was a kid. I learned how to fight. I got a nickname. They called me Shoe Leather. I was little, but they could beat me up, and I hurt them in the process.
So you used to stutter and you have dementia now, or do you still stutter and have dementia?
Chris Wallace said there were 158 interruptions in that debate we had. And it was just very difficult I didn't want to further demean the process of the debate by getting in a shouting match with him on the one hand, and I tried very hard, if you notice, to look in the camera and answer the questions directly, but they kept getting banged. I hope this next meeting we're going to have, it's a debate, but a town meeting we're going to have supposedly coming up, that I hope we at least have an opportunity to hear the question and answer the question directly before there's an interruption. But as I said to the president, not here, not tonight, not me. I'm not putting up with it.
Let me ask you this, Vice President.
Not me,
Biden.
not now. I'm not putting up with it, but he literally did. He got interrupted. He didn't stop him.
You called him a clown, a fool. You told him to shut up. I think most people believe that the president was interrupting you, but it seemed to go against some of the language you've said about not being divisive. Do you regret any part on your part?
It did, and I just. There was I was trying to figure out how I could possibly have him respect the debate.
He can't answer this right.
Respect the moderator, and get us an opportunity to speak. The one thing that became absolutely clear, he didn't want to answer any questions. He did not want to talk about substance.
Says the guy who skipped the court packing question.
One single time that I can recall that he offered a substantive answer or criticism related to.
You can't recall because you're old.
It was all invective. It was all personal. It was all things that have nothing to do with whether they're going to change these people's lives for the better.
What?
And I did get very frustrated. And I should have said this is a clownish undertaking instead of calling him a clown. But the fact is, it was, I'll be very honest with you, I think it was embarrassing for the nation to see the President of the United States just hectoring like he did, and everything was about a personal attack.
Yeah, but to the point of the question, though.
Exactly, you just dodged the question.
World leaders are going to get under your skin,
I've dealt with more world leaders than he has, went face to face over 8 years. And I've got under my skin, and we've had very quiet conversations. I've told President Putin exactly what I think of him. He knows it. We looked eye to eye. We know what's going on.
And what'd you get done? Crimea was taken by Putin. It did nothing.
Across the board. You can look back on all those international meetings I have. You can't think of a time when I've not handled it properly.
All right,
I don't have somebody screaming at me in the next podium.
His foreign leader interactions are so forgettable. He can't even mention one right now.
Michelle Cruz is from Coral Gables. Used to be a registered Republican, but voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Her husband is in the crowd, I believe. What's your question?
Can we get a Republican-leaning one? Jesus Christ, they're all for Biden.
As a mother of a police officer and the wife of a retired police officer, served 28 years, the term defunding the police is of concern and troubling. I understand that police departments do need reform. We need to serve and protect safely and properly. With that being said, I would like to know what you and your administration's policies in reforming the police, how those will come about, how they will be best handled to ensure police officer safety and the public's and the citizens' safety as well.
I grew up in a neighborhood where the guys I grew up in my working class neighborhood either became cops, firefighters, or priests. I wasn't qualified to be any one of them. I have had overwhelming support from police my whole career up until this year, as your husband will tell you. The vast majority of police are honorable, decent men and women who risk their lives every single day when they put on that badge and walk out that door. They have a right to come home safely. But there's bad apples in every profession. There are lousy commentators, there are lousy presidents, there's lousy senators, docs, and they should be, in fact, I don't know any police department around that isn't happy to get rid of a lousy cop because it just reflects on them. And by the way, the same with the protesters. It's a right to protest peacefully. But once you pick up a bat and start smashing windows, once, in fact, you light something on fire, once you engage in violence, you should be arrested and held accountable. And I've never had a position different than that from the very beginning. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do what I've done in the past.
Denounce Antifa then.
These interests together. Peaceful protesters, police chiefs, police officers.
Who are the rioters?
As well as the civil rights groups
BLM?
In the White House.
Anarchists?
And sit down and decide what are the things that need to be done to
wishy-washy on crime. Weaker than Clinton and Obama on crime, actually.
Increasing police budgets. When your husband goes on a call that, in fact, is a 911 call, it's better if he or she has with them a psychologist or psychiatrist with them, someone who knows how to.
So you're just going to have the psychologist sitting next to the 911 operator, you freaking idiot.
Things we should be doing.
Jesus Christ, this guy's
I also propose
so slow.
that we spend significantly more money on community policing. The reason it worked, my son used to be an attorney general of the state of Delaware.
Yeah, resegregate the police. That's a good idea.
You get the law enforcement together with the community so they know one another. Because that kid walking across the street with a hoodie on may be the next poet laureate.
Who's
it
that?
doesn't mean that child is going to be in trouble. And so we got to make sure there's more communication. That's what I'm going to do as president, bring together a national commission sitting in the White House with me and working this out.
All right, our
very mediocre answer. He just can't give a good answer. He's too retarded.
She is an undecided voter. Nicole, what's your question?
Hello, Vice President Biden.
My
as an
gosh.
African-American female, I have never lived through what I'm living through right now, and at times I don't feel safe in this country. And so my question to you is, what would you do to stop extremist and white supremacist groups?
Stop what, I'm sorry?
White supremacist groups. And what would be your approach to police reform to ensure that...
When has a white supremacist group killed a black person this year? You gotta be freaking kidding me. God.
The president's own FBI chief has said, director, the greatest domestic threat to terrorism are white supremacists.
Retarded.
And when you have a president saying to one particular group of white supremacists that in fact stand down but stand by, that is like a clarion call to get ready. Get ready. It's totally inappropriate. These guys are driving me crazy. I love them, but I can't see when they walk by. But all kidding aside,
he's ruining his stream of thought.
We got to make sure
it's like a cat with a laser.
Police have, when we interview police for the job, that there's a more thorough interview process. There's more background checking being done and attitudes. It matters. The cops are like kind of like school teachers. Everything lands on their desk, no matter what it is. Whether it's a child that's in trouble on the street, or
he's
whether
missing
it's
the point of the
fucking
question.
Someone who's robbing a bank.
What that? His train of thought is completely off.
To how to handle
he's got a RAM of half a
They
gigabyte.
need more help. They need more money, as a matter of fact. But in the meantime, what we have to do is make sure there is, quote, it sounds, all the tough guys are going to say it's a silly word, sensitivity training, understanding other cultures, know what people are like, what they're thinking about, how they act, what is consistent with their...
Just keep pandering, kissing minority butt. Yeah, keep going.
We know that. We're a
Sensitivity
nation of
training.
immigrants. We're a nation that's so diverse. And it's very difficult to make sure police officers are trained enough to be able to know
so
what to
the country's
expect
diverse and we need to get used to it. But also let's let in more immigrants as we're struggling to deal with the ones we already have.
Diminishing
this guy's a
the kind
retard.
of force that they use. What is the minimum force required in order to be able to deal with whatever the situation is? It's about diminishing the prospect of use of excessive force. It's about eliminating some things totally, like chokeholds.
Why?
It's about making sure that no-knock warrants are changed so people know what's going on.
Yeah, so that they can flush their drugs before you open the door, right? Yeah.
President Obama and
this guy does not know what he's talking about. And this woman has...
doing that until
black girl has like curtain,
what happened was, if you notice,
the ends of curtains on her
there's been sort
ears.
of a dog whistle out there. That is that everything's about division and hate. The reason I decided to run for office, I hadn't planned on running again. I give you my word, after my son passed, I wasn't going to run again. But when I saw those people coming out of the woods, literally the fields, carrying torches in Charlottesville, screeching that, if you close your eyes, remember what you saw. Their veins bulging, preaching anti-Semitic hate, the same exact language used in Germany in the 30s, accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan.
So he's just like inventing stuff and like regurgitating the same talking points.
What do you think? He said there are very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything remotely like that.
That's out of context.
Dog whistle. And it bothers me a lot.
Mr. Vice President, though, the critics and Donald Trump himself will say that you had almost 50 years, working in government and legislation and as a vice president, and you weren't able to accomplish those things then.
Yes, I wasn't president.
He points out to the criminal justice reform bill, and you and Barack Obama served at a time when you had both houses of Congress and still couldn't get some of these things.
Yeah, we did. We let 18,000 people got clemency. He got 2 or 3. What he's talking about. We had the violent crime rate was down 15% in our administration. 15% down. You didn't see these white supremacists rising up. Look, one thing I learned a long time ago, I got involved because of the civil rights movement when I was a kid. My state is the 8th largest black population. No great shakes. I'm not making myself out to be a great civil rights leader, but that's how I got involved in politics.
He's anything but.
One of the interesting things was that I came back from Wilmington after my city was burned. 20% of it was burned to the ground when Dr. King was assassinated. And I had a job with
So did the blacks burn down the building? Or I mean the city?
The only city in America since the Civil War occupied by the National Guard with drawn bayonets for 10 months. And after I got admitted to the bar, I decided I couldn't do this. I quit and became a public defender. And I remember going down to, if you ride the Northeast Corridor, you go from Washington to New York, you go by the Wilmington station. I used to have to interview my clients down there before their arraignment. And what would happen is that I found that I thought that black and whites would never get together again in Delaware. And here I was, almost 40 years later to the month, in January of 2009, waiting for a train to come from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, carrying a black man, about to pick me up to take me 147 miles to Washington, D.C. to be sworn in as president and vice president. And I called my this is God's truth. I called my 3 kids up. One's a social worker, one was running the World Food Program USA, the largest in the world, and my other son was the Attorney General. And I was standing on the platform. I looked over the east side, which had just been leveled, and what they call the 3rd Street Bridge had been burned. And I said, look, guys, I said, don't tell me things can't change. Look what's happened. When I stood here 40 years ago to the month, that was burned to the ground. Now look at it. Look at it. And I talked about there's hope. But I made a big mistake. I didn't realize that you can't defeat hate. Hate only hides. It hides under the rocks. And when you give it oxygen, when you breathe into it, you bring out the worst of people and you legitimize them. That's what's happened. We've legitimized these people who engaged in hate based on race and color and religion.
This doesn't even make sense.
And the way we have to deal with it is we have to make sure that we equip every agency, federal, state, and local agency, with the tools that are going to be bringing people together.
Vice President Biden, on that note, we're going to have to take a short break. We've got more questions from our voters, and we'll do that.
Wow. All right. Yeah, so far so bad. He has not answered a single one question correctly. Now, is he melting down like his advisors dread? No, but he is getting close to it every freaking question. But he has not been pushed hard yet.
Miami and the town hall meeting with former Vice President Joe Biden, taking questions from undecided voters. Our next question comes from Danny Lavandera. Danny, what's your question?
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. Teachers need to be in the classroom, but I believe that this needs to be done in a safe environment for all. What are your plans to ensure that schools are safe for teachers as well as students in the middle of this pandemic?
Number one, depending on the circumstance in terms of the readmission rate, the transmission rate in your community, that would have a lot to do whether the school should open at all, whether the chance should be taken. That's what all the senior doctors and immunologists say. So if you have a high rate of the spread of the disease in your community, it's better not to open that school. But if you're at a place where it's less than under 1, then in fact, it's possible to open. But you have to open safely, and it requires 4 things. It requires making sure that you as a teacher, my wife as a teacher, has the PPE to be able to open safely so your health is in good shape, that because children can communicate the disease as well as contract it, number 1. Number 2, you have to be in a position where the children are able to be in smaller modules. That requires more teachers or spreading out students in a way that you don't have large groups. If you have a class of 25, you end up having 2 classes of 12, for example. So you have smaller groups. Number 3, that the sanitation capacity in this school is upgraded so you're able to keep everything from the laboratories to the hallways to the surfaces clean, and they're able to be done. And fourthly, to make sure that you're in a situation where there is a circumstance that you know that there is not overcrowding in the school so that you have enough teachers, as I said, to make sure that you can spread them out, spread out the children. When that is done, then you can more safely open up. That's what and I'd be happy to send you a copy of the actual plan I wrote back in July, based on the recommendations of the leading scientists in the country as to how to safely open. Because what people are worried about, they're worried about going home, the child going home with the disease, spreading it to the grandpop or grandmom or the older member of the family, and them getting very sick. And right now, we haven't even done, in the vaccines, there's not even been any experimentation done on testing children for a vaccine yet. That's a different issue. But in the meantime, you can open safely, limit class size, make sure the hallways are open in ways that they're not crowded, everybody wearing a mask, social distancing, ventilation taken care of in the schools so that you're able to make sure that it is not lingering in the air. And there are the kinds of things, and it's estimated by the superintendents nationwide to open every school in America safely would be about $200 billion.
All right, Danny, thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Cassidy Brown in Orlando. Voted for the first time in 2016. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Hey, Cassidy.
Hello, Mr. Biden. My youngest sister is in high school right now, and I knew whenever I was graduating high school and entering college that I wanted to obtain my degree and start a career before starting a family. Having access to birth control and safe reproductive health care was imperative in making that true for me. So considering the new Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, what are your particular plans to protect women's reproductive rights in the U.S.?
Number 1, we don't know exactly what she will do, although the expectation is that she may very well move to overrule Roe.
There you go.
But
Another mess up.
The only responsible response to that would be to pass legislation making Roe the law of the land. That's
crap.
what I would do.
It's not going to get passed.
We will take a short break.
Mitch McConnell will kill it. Mitch McConnell would murder that bill in the Senate. Even if it's not even in a Republican majority Senate, if it's close enough, he could kill it. Honestly, now, another break. This guy cannot go more than 15 minutes without a freaking break. You gotta be kidding me. Alright, next. Bing, bing, bong. Let's go. Alright. Sleepy Joe Biden, Town Hall number 2. Well, in the last month-ish,
in Miami
so.
with Joe Biden, and we've got more questions from our voters. Let's go to Ismail Eliano, who voted for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, but has voted Republican in the past. What's your question for Mr. Biden?
Mr. Vice President. So you talk a lot about unity and division, but it seems now more than ever, there's a divisiveness in the country that goes way beyond disagreeing with policy or whether you have made the right decision or not. It's either you're with me or you're against me. The role of president, in my opinion, should be to unify as much as possible. So what 3 actions will you take as president to get us back to being one country versus several little, fiefdoms that are trying to yell each other about who's wrong and right?
Well, first of all, there's no reason why you should know, but I think, I'm not asking Lester to confirm, but he's heard, my entire career, I've been able to bring Democrats and Republicans together. And now people say, well, that was the old days, Joe. Things have changed. Well, the only thing that's changed is the way in which the politics that has been moved by some in the party have just gotten really ugly. I think what happens is, I think when people see, if in fact I'm fortunate enough to win, I think the absence of the president's willingness to go after and hold anyone accountable who disagrees with him, like he did to his former attorney general down in Alabama when I campaigned against him when he left the office, people are going to be less unwilling to compromise, number one.
He's struggling to
Number
answer,
two,
man. Jesus,
he's
gassing out.
What I learned a long time ago
He's
is
on
that
exhaust fumes.
it's always appropriate to question another man or woman's judgment. It's never appropriate to question their motive. I learned that lesson very early on when I got elected to the Senate.
That's retarded.
I didn't want to go because my wife and daughter were killed between the time I got elected and the time that I was sworn in. And a senator named Mansfield, who was a majority leader, took me under his wing and said he wanted, I insisted meeting with me every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I thought you got assignments from majority leaders. No senator gets an assignment. It took me about 5 weeks, Lester, to realize just taking my pulse, see how emotionally I was doing, because I agreed I'd come and stay for 6 months till they got organized. And what happened was, I remember one day I walked into the Senate. If you look at C-SPAN, you know that big gold arched door you walk through to go down to the well. I walked in for my meeting, and as I walked down to the floor of the Senate to find out when the last vote was going to be before I walked out the other side, because I went home every night to see my kids, there was a senator who was excoriating two people who became very close friends of mine, Bob Dole and Teddy Kennedy. They had introduced the precursor for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I thought it was heartless. So anyway, I was more afraid of missing my meeting with the leaders, so I went in, sat down in front of them. This was last week in May.
What does this have to do with anything? Hurry up.
And he looked at
While
me and
being
said,
another
"What's the
question.
matter, Joe?" And I went on and I said, this particular senator had no social redeeming value. How could he be so heartless? How could he not care about people? How could he say a curb cut was inappropriate to have, that buses had to have lifts, etc.? He looked at me and said, Joe, what would you say if I told you that same senator and his wife 2 years ago were reading the paper in their hometown? There was a picture of a young man in braces from under his arms down to his ankles and 2 steel crutches, 14 years old, saying, all I want for Christmas is someone to love me and take me home. So what would you say if I told you they adopted that young man?
But you know, I don't think you got to the heart of Ismail's question, which is something tangible.
Again,
something you can
screwed.
do as a new president.
I learned from him, he said, it's always appropriate to question another man's judgment, but not their motive. Once you question a senator's motive, you can never get anything done. I say, you're in the pocket of the cement industry. Let's see if we can get a transportation bill passed. It doesn't work. And that's why look, when President Trump had already been elected, I was vice president, he had already been elected. And I put together a group that came up with almost $9 billion to deal with cancer research. $9 billion. They said no one would vote for it. We had a total of only, I think,
so overlook corruption to get bipartisan bills done is basically what he's saying.
398 House members voted for it, and 96 senators voted for it. My point is, you stop questioning motive. You go out and you debate the issues, because we've all gotten down to the point where everything is about attacking the integrity of the other person. And the last thing I would do is make sure that we, in fact, I reached out constantly, which I did as vice president and as a chairman of a committees, Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committee. Reach out and brought the opposition in. For example, last point. For example, they said, Joe, what are you going to do if you get to pick, the next Supreme Court justice? It says advise and consent. You need the Senate to give advice and consent. Every president has pulled us together, has said, this is what I'm thinking of, and gone to Republican senators and Democratic senators and said, what do you think? You put together amendment. You put together coalitions. That's how you deal in a democracy.
All right. Peter Gonzalez has next question.
Welcome to Miami, Mr. Vice President. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. I was raised in Hialeah, Florida, and I've been living in Coral Gables for the last 20-plus years. Cuban American and Venezuelan voters here in South Florida are being targeted with messages by the Trump campaign claiming that a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for the radical left and socialism and even communism. What can you tell people in my family, my friends, who are understandably concerned with that issue, that would make them feel comfortable voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
And let me just point out we have about 3 or 4 minutes left.
I look like a socialist. Look, I'm the guy that ran against the socialists. Remember, I got in trouble in the whole campaign. 20-some candidates. Joe Biden was too centrist, too moderate, too straightforward. That was Joe Biden. I have taken on the very people that, in fact, we're worried about. I've taken on.
So I beat literally everybody else in my party who's to the left of me.
All these dictators.
So
I haven't cozied up to them.
You vote for me, and all my friends are freaking socialists.
It stops here.
Okay,
it stops
so
with me. It stops with me as president. I am no more a socialist than or a communist than Donald Trump is. Well, I won't say it anyway.
What?
So they need not worry.
He just
look at the
flubbed
record.
that up.
One single syllable that I've ever said that could lead you to believe that I was a socialist or a communist.
What?
All right, we've got time for, I think, one more question.
Increase taxes and spending and increase the size of government. Oh, that's not socialist, bro.
Spent a lot of time in Colombia.
Thank you, Lester, for the introduction. Vice President Biden, thank you so much for coming to Miami and speaking to us today. If you win in November,
we're the Trump-leaning independents, man.
Age gap between you and myself. My generation, Generation Z, is growing up with school shootings, police brutality, and protests, and the inability to earn a livable wage, even when holding advanced
This guy looks like he's
myself.
27.
How can someone like yourself, an older white male, represent my generation over the next 4 years?
Oh my
Please,
God.
Vice President Biden, can you guarantee me that the American dream still exists?
No.
That's at the end. I guarantee it still exists, number one. Look, with age comes wisdom, hopefully. I've been there. I've watched. I'm the guy that's talked about when the 9/11 generation getting so badly damaged. I'm the only one you've heard speak in the last 5 years about how your generation, my granddaughter just graduated with honors from Columbia Law School, in fact, is having trouble.
Which one?
That I have 2 granddaughters that are in school, in college.
Stutter.
2 more children who are in high school. They, in fact, your generation has been really put behind the 8 ball. You get all these degrees, you end up with all this debt, and you're in a position where you can't get a job because no one's hiring, or if they're hiring at very low wages. And so what we have to do is...
Why would that happen? Why would that be the case? I don't know. Immigration, H-1Bs, regulation, taxation.
If you come from a family less than 125 grand and you went to a public university, I'm going to make sure that...
What if I make 130 grand?
Gets $10,000 knocked off of their student debt as we try to get out of this god-awful pandemic. Going to make sure that the opportunities you have are consistent with, for example, if you're a first-home home buyer, you haven't even had the opportunity to gain enough income to be able to have a down payment.
He's not reassuring in the slightest.
$15,000 credit to be able to buy their first home, because that's how people accumulate wealth. That's how they get started. That's how they move. We're going to make sure we recognize you, advance you, and make sure that you look. My children, my grandchildren, you are the future. You are the future.
Nobody cares.
For example, I made the comment that I view myself as a transitional president. They meant, is that one term? It's transition to your generation. You're the best educated. You're the most open. You're the least prejudiced generation in American history. The future is yours, and I'm counting on you.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. That is going to conclude tonight our town hall. Our thanks to former Vice President Joe Biden, as well as to our participants here in Miami and all of you at home. We should note that well before the president's illness, we extended an invitation to him to participate in a town hall with us as well. That invitation still stands. There's a busy road ahead in the run-up to election day.
Why would Trump want to show up to NBC? You literally have a town hall in which Sleepy Joe, look, Joe Biden cannot even go to a town hall where, as far as I can tell, in this one at least, every second or third question had a 3-minute break, number one. Number two, Joe Biden was screwing up every other word, and like every several words. He was messing up. He was stuttering a ton. He was losing his train of thought. You let him answer a question for more than 15 seconds, he's going to veer off to some literally 50-year-old anecdote about how his kid got killed in a car accident or something like that. And Again, he's not very reassuring. Do I look like a socialist? No, actually, Joe. You look like an 80-year-old white demented left-leaning guy who literally everybody else in your party almost is to the left of you. And like you said, I beat Bernie in the primary. But Bernie still influenced your platform. Was it not Bernie that got you to do the cash and bail thing, part of the Green New Deal? I mean, you are cucking on immigration, where you used to say, well, we're going to deport you like we did under Obama, but now it's, only if you commit a serious felony. So literally, if you come here illegally and you don't kill anyone or you don't steal anything necessarily, you get to stay here forever, and you get amnesty. And this guy was dragged to the left by the commies and the socialists in his party, and he's a vulnerable old man, and yet he's still saying that, I'm not a socialist. Okay, fine, yeah, okay. That's like saying, you elect him as president, and it's like letting in a guy with AIDS coming to your house and him being completely okay, and then a couple years later he's on his deathbed, because this is literally the same thing. You're like, well, figuratively you are letting in an alien guy who may not be the bad thing, socialism at first, but then you let in a super far left senator take the presidency eventually in Kamala Harris, and then you have even further left people in that cabinet than even in the first. And you can see how you can introduce socialism into the United States, unfortunately. Not only that, but they're planning to pack the court. And again, he's saying Donald Trump does not answer any questions. Well, okay, so are you going to pack the court, yes or no? Who are you going to appoint? Where's your list of judicial nominees? Again, he cannot answer any of these questions. He cannot pull out a list of nominees, such as Donald Trump did, or such as other people within the Republican Party, such as Mitch McConnell, recommended to President Trump in 2016. And I frankly think that you are bonkers if you think that Joe Biden did well in this town hall. Again, the bar is so low that literally him not dying on stage would basically be considered a moderate win by the left. And also, again, softballs on softballs, you can see that all these independents that I can remember are rhinos and people that are leaning Biden. Okay, so this whole independent voter crap is BS. And again, you are looking at an approximate amount of how many Republicans in there that are Trump voters? I don't remember. Anyways, Donald Trump had to deal with a lopsided audience, and when he was on ABC with George Stephanopoulos, that video I covered too, and that town hall, he did handle pretty well, and that's with people being openly hostile. Over here, everybody's being nice to him, and he's still struggling to answer, so you can see the different types of caliber of candidates that we have this election. And again, I'm not even that panicked about this. I think Donald Trump has this in the bag. And again, when you look at the sort of candidate we have here against Donald, we are not looking at somebody who is sharp, who is strong, who can really stand up to the pressure of Donald Trump in the second or third debate, approximately when those are going to happen this month in October 2020. And when you add in all this, I do think that this town hall on the net was a negative for Biden. You look at the Twitter trends recently, and you have Claudia Conway, the daughter of Kellyanne Conway, spokesperson for Donald Trump, formerly as, and she is number 1 or 3 trending, and Joe Biden's all the way at 29 with the town hall. And when Donald Trump was doing the town hall, I believe he was definitely in the top 10, right? And this is not even top 25. That just goes to show that within even 12 hours of this coming out, he's already flubbing this up. I do say that Joe Biden did an admirable job for not dying on stage for a couple minutes at a time, but again, you are not having even a mediocre standard for you. I mean, this is the lowest bar I've seen for a politician in my life in terms of how mediocre he is and how people slowly get to recognize the fact. And again, in order to have not looked terrible to the MSN, all he had to do was not have a stroke and not to say the N-word, and he did just that. And to the right wing, he convinced virtually nobody. Nobody saw this. Again, not too many views. This did not change my view as I'm a Trump supporter. This did not change a single iota of what I thought of him. If anything, I think that the cocktail of drugs they have him on might be working a little better now than it did before in previous town halls as well as interviews. But again, you are really seeing the transformation of a country and a Democratic Party where it's getting very pathetic, and the bar's solo again, and the fake news media will try to skew this as much as they want. But this is an all-out slaughter for Donald Trump, and he's going to feast. He's gonna collect his harvest on Joe Biden. Sleepy Joe does not have the caliber of emotion, not the wit in his mind to really keep up with a guy like Donald Trump. And Donald may be impulsive, he may be selfish, he may be arrogant, he might be a jerk, he might be a bully, he might be old and overweight, but he is still not as old as Joe Biden. He is not demented like Joe Biden. He has infinitely more energy than Joe Biden. And I think that really you are going to see a turnaround in this election that you've never seen in a long time, okay? Anyways, guys, I do think Joe Biden lost in this town hall. He did terrible. I would rate him a 3 out of 10. He did not win over any voters with this that I can think of, and this did not get the press that he wanted, and it did not help him in any significant way. And this will not affect the polls one iota, as far as I can tell. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Subscribe, and comment down below what you thought of this. If you think he did anything better than a 5, I think you're retarded. Anyways, guys, goodbye.